Russia anytime soon, or Denmark or Norway. But if you put an army invading Sweden, they will defend themselves. Quite right. That's what we need. Non-violent, largely, but also, robust defence forces like Switzerland has. And my friend who founded Just Defence, again, an attempt to shift military policy away from aggression towards purely defensive purposes. Anyway, so I trained as a school teacher. I taught happily in British schools. Huge challenges with kids' attitudes towards, Sophia-phobia, not liking learning, not liking education. There's become a sort of cultural resistance to knowledge. It's become chic to attack intellectuals, chic to attack experts, chic to, attack education. And that is a problem. Because it's self-defeating, it's about self-destruction, this. And there is a psychological problem called self-sabotage, when people unconsciously, they don't do it deliberately, but unconsciously, they engineer situations where they self-sabotage. I think Brexit was the fruition of years of self-deprecation, self-sabotaging by people who'd been trained to hate knowledge by the elites that are pumped out by Eton and Oxbridge to then control the country. Because if you have people that hate knowledge, they won't be able to organise to fight back. And so the left in Britain became gradually, its power was completely removed. And Corbyn was the last attempt to get a sort of socialist ideology, but it ran up against Big Brother, high tech, false propaganda, and the kind of Nigel Nick's view of the world, which is psychological warfare on your own people by the Eton elites. I mean, that's what we've got now. It's called the Tory party. So, challenging. I want to share something else because I'm talking about education. And that is, I want to talk about the Delphic Games very briefly. This is a wonderful project. That the Delphic Games took place in parallel to the Olympic Games in ancient Greece. They took place for over 1,000 years almost, since ancient times. Every 4 years, the great poets, painters, musicians, dancers, and theatre people of Greece would go and perform at Delphi in a solemn way that was under Apollo and Dionysus, the gods of Delphi, and always the omnipresent goddess. And the winner would get a prize. They didn't get money prizes, they got a laurel wreath, because that's the symbol of Apollo. And they got the kudos of being able to say, yeah, I won the poetry prize at Delphi this year. So listen up, people, So we're trying to revive these Delphic Games. It was revived in 1994. My friend Christian Kirsch of Berlin is the Secretary General. There's a large community of Delphic games, aficionados, and I've been appointed head of education for this project, which is a great honour because of my passion for education. And I want every school and university to have to apply for a Delphic award. They would only get it if they answer and fulfil certain minimum requirements. So they have an interdisciplinary approach to knowledge. They've kept their art department, their music department, their drama, their dance, their theatre departments, and it's offering a fully rounded education. They're not just training kids to be little factory robots doing just business studies and that's all. No, they're learning about ethics, philosophy, spirituality, art, music, ecology, science applied to human problems. They're learning how to think above all. Now, that's a Delphic school, and that would be worthy of the Delphic Award, which would then be like a plaque the headmaster would put on his study or in the hall. And that would in turn attract bright kids to come and study at that school. Because the parents, I'm a parent of 3 daughters, I want to know my kids are going to have a fully rounded, brilliant education where they're going to learn how amazing life is and how full of wonder and that the arts are incredible. And they'll be happy in that school. So the Delphic Awards is what I'm working on. And also that award, the Delphic Award, would also be given to universities worldwide. Because too many universities are too narrow in their curricula. They force students to just do one thing or the other. You can't do a degree in astronomy, ecology, and linguistics. Well, why not? Why can't you? I mean, that would be a fascinating degree. So a university to receive the Delphic Award would be interdisciplinary. It would encourage advanced thinking, joined up thinking across disciplines, like the University of Sussex was set up to do, where my mother taught, where my friend Michael Brown, her partner for a while, was always ensuring that all science graduates got some arts in their degree and some arts graduates got some science. He was a scientist who taught at Winchester College, and his mission at Sussex, it was his job, as well as teaching chemistry, was to ensure, run the curriculum that, so every science degree had some arts component, and every arts degree had some science component. So that would get the Delphic Award. University of Sussex would win it. But universities that just are factory fodder training groups for the military-industrial complex, and they're churning out clever geeks who can make spying equipment that can go on your Android phone, but they're not learning any ethics. They're not learning about spirituality. They come out with brainy brains without knowing the difference between right and wrong. Those people are the danger. Now, the Delphic Games and the Delphic Education Department, we're going to shoo those people off the planet because they really are a danger, and they're not educated. Those type of people are not educated at all. They may have fancy degrees, but they're not educated in the fundamental sense that Socrates insisted on, which is ethically knowing the difference between right and wrong. That's education, folks, and that's what the International Delphic Council are doing, which I'm helping with for this purpose. And if you're interested in that, if you're a teacher or you're a scholar at a university and you're interested in getting the Delphic Award, please write to me. There's a procedure that we're putting in place. I want to talk about education for enlightenment, because ultimately, what's the point of life? If Keats is right, the world is a school for souls, then the purpose of life is enlightenment. Now, what is the word for enlightenment in different religions? I looked at that, and I published a book called Enlightenments, plural, because obviously, we need some sort of agreement on what enlightenment is. And some people think it's, denying all the things of the body and leaving the body as soon as possible. That's the Manichaean approach. The body's evil, it's all horrible, we hate matter, let's leave, get out of here as soon as possible. Others, sensualists, hedonists, say no, it's about pleasure. Education is about fine-tuning your pleasures. That was Epicurus and the Epicurean tradition. Is there any possible middle way between those two? Anyway, I asked lots of questions about education and enlightenment. I discovered in Latin there are many words for education, not just educatio, but eruditio, which also means enlightenment. To be educated to a very high degree is to get eruditio. And that's come down in modern English. Someone who's got eruditio is called erudite. Now, that actually means enlightened. Now, someone at a university worthy of the Delphic Award would qualify as someone who's erudite. All professors ought to be erudite, but they aren't, because the universities, the institutions where they teach, are too often failing in their ethical standards. And they're self-promoting, people that can do fancy equipment studies on technology and science, but have no clue about right and wrong. And those are the kind of people that have done the bioengineered pandemic, let's leak it from a lab, tragedy people. I mean, it's interesting, by the way, isn't it, about the pandemic, that the American intelligence even can't decide, is this a manufactured bioweapon that leaked, or is it just a natural thing? Of course they can't decide, because nobody's got access to the real data. I've said again and again till I'm blue, it will only happen when the Bioweapons Convention is invoked. How stupid are politicians? I've written to the Prime Minister of New Zealand saying, do it, get on, invoke this Bioweapons Convention. We will never ever know the truth about the origins of COVID till that is done. So we're having a meeting next month for the International Commission of Inquiry into the etiology of COVID. That's a group I've set up because, education is an ongoing duty, and we have a duty to find this out. So yes, Buddhist approaches to education I've looked at deeply Hindu, the idea of the Rishi, the Forest Academy, the Druid understanding of education such as it can be reconstructed. That was more about self-knowledge. It was about knowledge of your past lives, about ethics, and so on. And there are institutions like Esalen in America or Findhorn that are trying to stress that education for enlightenment. And I've worked with a group trying to get a Wisdom Academies network going. So that would include all these like alternative educational projects. We had a meeting, and I'm still working with that goal, that we can have a network of Wisdom Academies where you can do more initiation type education. And I'm involved therefore with the Wisdom Keepers project of my friend Satyen Raja, which is looking at that. How can we have an education that is an initiatory process of self-realization? There's some amazing teachers and wisdom keepers on that forum. This is what the Druids and seers of the ancients, that's the level they were working at. And we still are. So in terms of religious education, so you'd think that, well, surely the problems of the world would be sorted if only we knew all this stuff and learned it in schools. Why isn't quality religious education available in schools? Why do we have to spend years before we get this kind of input? What I'm sharing with you now is the fruit of 40 years research and scholarship into these mysteries. Now, I'm sure that if me as a young boy of 15 had had a lecturer like me, as an older teacher, I would have really got serious about learning even sooner than I did. I feel like I wasted the first 10 years of my life. I should have learned Sanskrit, Latin, Japanese, Zen Buddhism, and read the Upanishads earlier on. I think I'd love to see us get more passionate about learning earlier on and to take wisdom seriously. Now, so that's why I then went back and taught religious studies in schools and philosophy. And that's why I produced this, my periodic table of the world's religious and philosophical traditions, which is being made into a big poster. It's going to be available for schools. I want this on the wall of every single school department of religious studies and philosophy in every country in the world, and every history and humanities department, because the whole of history is here. And it's subdivided, colour-coded by different genres of spiritual and philosophical orientation. So you have primal religions, Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, humanism, that's the orange ones, Shintoism, the dark green, this is the Jain tradition. These are new religious movements, and then you have esoteric traditions like anthroposophy and Alice Bailey and theosophy and Freemasonry and so on. So all of these are really interesting. And then you have the philosophical traditions like Kantianism, Hegelianism, Platonism and so on, which again are very influential. The table shows you how many people follow these traditions now, how many will follow, if you aggregate, how many in the totality of all history, the cumulative total. The blue ones are all the different types of Christian, the pink are the Chinese and so on. These are the Persian. So it's a tool. Now, if you haven't bothered to study all 168 boxes, if your teacher hasn't shown you this when you were studying philosophy and religious studies at school, or if you did a degree in it, and this is the tool for learning. It's on my website, educationaid.net, and you can access all the details, and you can order a poster from me. The point of it is to give everybody access to the full totality of knowledge. There was a time when, so you've got a box called Gnostic Christianity, number 49, then you have a box called Roman Catholic Christianity, 43. Well, there was a time when you'd be persecuted as a Cathar if you were in the Gnostic box. You'd be burned at the fire in Montségur. And the Catholics ruled, the geopolitical power structure. What I'm saying as an educator, and this is why this sits well with, say, the French secular approach to education, or the American, or, the Indian, is that we all have the right as human beings to know the whole story. We can decide which box we're in, later. Most of us are born into a tradition, be it Islam or Judaism or whatever, or Christianity. But we're then free to change that. We can, if we go on an odyssey and study all 168 boxes, well, who knows, we might found a new box. I mean, I hope that in 1,000 years I come back and reincarnate, and the table is slightly evolved by then. Maybe there's going to be a whole new section. Let's say the new religious movement lot will be bigger. I don't know. So, yeah, everyone has the right, the human right to know. I come back to what I said at the very beginning. My passion is, as an educator, started from my own personal desire to know, that will to knowledge, which I think is essential to being human. It's what Descartes said. I think, therefore I am. What he meant was, I want to know, therefore I am. That is my élan vital, as Henry Bergson put it, great French philosopher. Which leads me to Afghanistan, because I've taught Muslim students at the Muslim College from Afghanistan. I love Afghanistan, its culture. And I'm actually, I just find the ironies of history so interesting. 20 years after 9/11, 20 years after the invasion of Afghanistan, $2.26 trillion has been spent by America alone on this war. 20 years war, which by definition is always going to be unwinnable. I mean, wars are not things to win, actually. They're things to grow out of, which is the Swedish model. 71,000 dead civilians alone have been caused during this 20 years. 26,000 kids, Afghan kids, have been either killed or maimed during these 20 years. And the whole thing has cost $2.26 trillion, which is thought to rise because of the interest payments on that. How the American government deals this is it borrows the money and then it pays interest. And it's going to rise to 6.5 trillion within a decade or two. I mean, I don't know why the government just doesn't say, well, sorry, cancelling the interest, that's enough, But I suppose the fact is that the American system is owned by the capitalist bank system, so interest is part of that deal. What it means is that $6.5 trillion has not been available for the American people to have healthcare, affordable healthcare for all, a decent transportation system, and a non-violent foreign policy, and to build a nonagon on top of the Pentagon, which is my idea of a 9-sided building that would be housing the Ministry of Peace in Washington on top of the Pentagon. All that money, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. $6.5 trillion. In order to what? Replace the Taliban by the Taliban. I mean, and it is shocking. So I just hope the Taliban will remember that Islam endorses education for all boys and girls, that it supports scholarship. I mean, I taught at the Muslim College with Dr. Zaki Badawi. I have a great love and affection for Islam. And that's why I've bothered and invested 10 years of my time, on and off, into my commentary on the Quran. And the Quran, when you read it properly and with scholarship and, you go into every line, as I've been doing, the Quran is a manifesto for all teachers. And that's why in Islam, scholarship was regarded as really, really important. Muhammad himself, although not a learned man, he was not erudite, but he was wise and he respected scholars. And, I've gone into every verse of the Quran. I'm just about to finish this. By Christmas, the entire project will be complete. It's all on my Global Green University. I've uploaded it as talking book. And so, every verse, every surah has amazing gems of knowledge. Let me just quote from one. Ra'ad, thunder, Surah 13. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. ALMR. These are the signs of the book. That which hath been revealed unto thee from thy Lord is the truth. But most men believe not. So in my commentary, into this, I've gone into great detail, particularly over these mysterious letters that begin several surahs. Aleph, Lam, Mem, Ra. Why? What are they, those letters? Well, I've explained this according to my book, The Kabbalah Runes, I believe it's certain that Muhammad received certain Kabbalistic initiations in his formative years. He was traveling about, he went to Hira, he went to Damascus, and he was learning with Khadija and his employer and then wife, and Waraka, her cousin and teacher. There was a network of influences on Muhammad, and this is the missing, unseen years of Muhammad. I believe he was up in Haran, in Edessa, studying Abrahamic traditions, studying the universal Gnostic wisdom that is in all esoteric traditions. He knew Zoroastrians, Manichaeans, pagans, and he tried to put it all together in synthesis. And then after like 15 years of this, finally it starts coming back out. He was able to then download the divine intelligence, just as a dream catcher can catch dreams. So the prophetic intelligence can pick up on the vibrations of divine intelligence. And if you're sensitive and subtle enough, you can pick up divine thought. And that's what Muhammad was able to do. And in my commentary on the Quran, I'm trying to explain that, how it happened, how it worked, and then giving the historical context of each verse. This has never been attempted before. As far as I know in history, I don't think even in Arabic or Turkish or Persian, I don't think any commentaries have been done that are as detailed, but I may be wrong, but certainly not in the modern times. I'm trying to use transpersonal psychology and science to try and explain how this divine intelligence can be picked up by prophetic intelligence and then downloaded. So, this kind of stuff should be taught at the University of Kabul. A Taliban is simply a student, that's all it means. Every Muslim is a Taliban. I'm a Taliban, it means I'm a student. Every Muslim is a perpetual student of Allah's wisdom and mysteries. It doesn't mean I have to go around with a funny hat and a Kalashnikov and shoot you if I don't like you. I mean, that is a anti-intellectual position. And of course, we now have ISIS types that are appearing and even, blowing up the Taliban. I mean, God, will Afghanistan's problems never end? Now, those ISIS types who are killers are not true Muslims, and they should be called out as such. They're the ones that are giving Islam a bad name, and always have, those terrorist types. That's not Muslims, that's not Islam. True Islam is about peace and surrender of ego to the divine infinite intelligence. The whole book of the Quran, if you haven't read it, read it, listen to my commentary, is about how to surrender that ego. Because it's always tempting. We always want, like Jeffrey Epstein, more girls, more cocaine, more money. We're all a Jeffrey Epstein. But we have to rise above that. We have to, transcend that level of being. People like Trump, Jeffrey Epstein's friend, people like Prince Andrew, they never get beyond the Jeffrey Epstein level of reality. And the Ghislaine Maxwell school, which is more girls, more pleasure, more orgies, No, that's so last century. We need to move on to a level beyond ego and become true students of the mysteries. Now that's deeper education, and that's what Afghanistan deserves. So I'd be happy to work. I'd love to go and teach in Kabul. There's a wonderful girls' school where they have they have 8,000 girls studying, and so they have to have two shifts. One start early in the morning and go till noon, and the other one comes in and goes till night. Let's fund these things. Let's put, if only those trillions, instead of being spent on bombs and weapons, and being spent on proper education, helping the people of Afghanistan, getting education aid up and running globally, we could have a peaceful planet by now. The West has spent 20 years pursuing a chimera of violence and revenge, and for what? Well, 9/11, they knocked our buildings down. No, actually, guys, it was done by an inside detonation. Look at the facts. Read my book on the history of 9/11. Do some research. The whole thing was a war game planned from the dark forces, and they know who they are. And as a historian, I'm coming after you. So I want to say Christian education is very important as well. Today is the day of St. John the Baptist, 29th of August. St. John the Baptist is a great chap. He was a hardcore educator. He didn't take prisoners. He didn't mess around. He'd gone away from the corruption of the evil elites that ran Jerusalem and were hypocrites and so on. He'd gone out into the margins, and he was teaching the route to God, the direct route, which is repentance and then living righteously. He didn't need fancy clothes, fancy food. He just lived very simply. And one of his students was St. Andrew. Another one was St. Peter. They were devotees of John the Baptist, and he had a cluster of people around him in the Jordan area. And he was teaching, and people were coming from all over Israel to listen to his teachings. Lynn Picknett and Debbie Benstead and others have said, well, John the Baptist is probably much more of an intellectual than we realise. Probably was trained partly in Egypt. Simon Magus may have been a student of his. You know, there was more going on with John the Baptist than meets the eye, which is why the Mandeans say he was actually the Messiah. There's still a little group in Iraq saying John was the real Messiah. But because he was killed by horrible Herodias, who was the wife of Herod Antipas, and got her daughter Salome to do a sexy dance, so Herod Antipas was tricked into offering her anything, and she said, I want the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And the poor guy was killed off. Now that's a symbol of the Jeffrey Epstein level of reality. You know, that's a Jeffrey Epstein type orgy. And nobody's got any brains apart from the one guy in the prison down below, John the Baptist, who's going to lose his head. Shocking. You know, it's one of those archetypal moments. But then old Jesus steps up. Jesus, his younger cousin, son of the Virgin Mary, who is the, relative of Elizabeth, John's mother, and Zechariah, who's his father. And Jesus takes forward the torch, you know. I believe there are like networks of light workers, and each generation has them, and that's why I've done a dictionary of saints and sages from all religions. And if one goes down, somebody else comes into their place. And when John the Baptist went down, Jesus had the courage to step up. And in my commentaries on the Gospels, I've gone into this in great detail. We know John the Baptist was a teacher, and so was Jesus. He was a rabbi. These guys are rabbis. They taught. They didn't have cameras, or they would have recorded lectures like this. You know, that would be lovely if we still had. You know, we could. But what we have is the Gospels. We have these precious writings, which record their teachings, and therefore, my view has always been that the greatest Islamic scholars and teachers, such as I've been fortunate enough to meet, like Syed Hussein Nasr, for instance, and the greatest Christian educators, there's no conflict between us. We understand each other perfectly because we're all trying to build the kingdom of God through the key of knowledge, the key of gnosis. We're trying to open the doors to understanding. There's a wonderful passage in the Lotus Sutra, which is the Buddhist equivalent. It's towards the end, and Buddha gives a sermon on the gateway to everywhere. And it's said that if you just listen to this sermon, you will reach paradise and enlightenment. Buddha is saying, knowledge is seen as a gateway. It's a knowledge to this or that qualification. But there is a special gateway, which only the most rarefied and advanced students of esoterica, the erudite students, can master. And that is the gateway to everywhere. It's a paradoxical concept. It's a typical Gnostic kind of idea in Buddhism. How can there be a gateway to everywhere? Well, it's a gateway to the absolute. And because the absolute is everywhere, every time, every place, everything, once you master that gateway, you reach enlightenment. You reach becoming one with the understanding, which is the everywhere. And we use the word understanding, meaning that which on everything stands. And once you reach that, the understanding, the common collective universal understanding, then that becomes the gateway to everywhere. Now that's what, the Lotus Sutra is one of the greatest Buddhist texts. It puts it in that paradox. But that's what all wisdom teachers are about, is finding that gateway to everywhere and sharing it. I want to move on and talk about also Jewish education. I've met many rabbis in my time. Rabbi Friedlander, a dear friend of mine. Rabbi Hugo Grin, when I taught in London. These were true educators. And Isaac Luria, who to me is one of the greatest of the Kabbalists and rabbis, said, he never wrote a book. And somebody grumbled and said, why don't you write a book, Isaac? And he said, I can't, because every time I open my mouth, everything is interconnected with everything else, and I want to say everything all at once. So instead, he just gave oral teachings, and his disciple, Moses Cordovero, eventually wrote down his system, and it became the bedrock of the greatest Kabbalistic schools, which are still going, both in Israel and London and New York and so on. I've been privileged to sit at their feet. The Kabbalah is the key of this universal gnosis within that context. It's also there in the Quran. It's there within Christianity because Christ was teaching from that same place. How else would he say, before Abraham was, I am? How else would it say in St. John's Gospel, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos became flesh? It's the Logos that is the intellect, the divine intellect within us all, the common universal understanding, the gateway to everywhere, that enables us to download that wisdom, because it belongs to us all. I'm not saying anything new here. I'm giving you what you already knew deep down within, but maybe your education, your indoctrination, your religion has blocked you from seeing that common universal understanding. My job as a peace educator is to get us all to open that gateway to everywhere, which is universal humanity, actually. And then we don't have to fear, the waste of another kind of Afghan war type thing, with another 20 years of bombs and killing and another excuse to spend $6 trillion, No, come on, guys. We've had it with militarism. This military-industrial, voracious monster that is constantly gobbling up its children. Just like, Zeus had to take on that generation that wants to do that. Old Kronos, who's always swallowing his children. No, enough is enough. We have to challenge this monster, and we have to say, thank you. We're going to take back the power, guys. We're the people. And we have this will to knowledge, and we want to know how to do peace now, for the sake of every single child, woman, mother, boy, husband on the planet. So that's it. I'm going to finish there because, anyway, you can see I love Clio as education. She's a muse of profundity, and I called my youngest daughter after Clio, and she's gone on to do a PhD at Cambridge, so, she is a little Clio in her own right. Here's a book on the philosophy of education. I just want to show that it's, there's so much to love about. I've only been able to skim the surface, but the great educators like Spinoza and Rousseau and Hume even, and Thomas Jefferson and so on, and Hegel, who wrote about Bildung, which is a German word. I'm head of Bildung for the Delphic Games, which I think is pretty cool, because Bildung actually means to build. What we have to do is Bildung here. And yeah, let's get our universities Delphic accredited, and let's see off these barbarians that have taken them over. And then here's the Bible, which is the greatest treasure house of wisdom teachings, apart from the Quran, and apart from the Lotus Sutra and all the others, and the Guru Granth Sahib. But, they're collectively in aggregate, all the wisdom teachings of the periodic table, collectively,